Hello and welcome to Race for the White House, our daily show where we get you the latest from the US elections 2024. On today's show, we tell you a little bit about how Kamala Harris can use the boost given to her by the Democratic National Convention, which just concluded, to win in the November polls. Also on the show, we tell you about the previously little known child tax credit system that has taken center stage in this political campaign. With all of this and more, let's get started. The Democratic National Convention wasn't just 4 days of fiery speeches, motivational speakers, and good vibes. Vice President Kamala Harris gained a great deal of political momentum when she accepted the party's historic presidential nomination bid. While she entered the race in very unusual circumstances, she has been leading in the polls by a slim margin. But the DNC gave the presidential hopeful a major bump in various opinion polls over Trump. The former president has blamed the glowing media coverage for Harris's extended honeymoon, as his campaign braces for a further slump in the polls. But now the question is this: can Harris leverage her DNC boost to win in the November poll? Now, last week's Democratic National Convention was a historic moment, both for the Democratic Party and for America. This was the first time a woman of color in any party appeared at a convention as the nominee for president. The American political landscape has witnessed two tectonic shifts in the past few months: an attempted assassination on one nominee and the late withdrawal of another. Former President Donald Trump used the assassination attempt on him in his favor. He tried to project himself as the candidate who took a bullet for America. And the RNC went on to show that Trump was on a glide path to the presidency. But since Joe Biden dropped out of the race and Harris was appointed as Trump's new challenger, the momentum has changed entirely. It turns out the Republicans have terribly underestimated Harris. She's been successful in portraying herself as a candidate of change, and typical of presidential politics in America, presidential candidates usually receive a polling bounce after their conventions. Republicans have just dismissed Harris's popularity as a sugar high that will quickly disappear. The Grand Old Party, also named for the Republican Party, further argues that even Hillary Clinton led Trump by several points after she accepted her party's nomination back in 2016. However, in the end, she lost to Trump. This year's campaign is being dominated by harsh personal attacks between the two candidates. But the playbook that Trump used to attack Biden can now be used against him. Trump used to accuse Biden of being too old and mentally unfit for office. But now these look like Trump's liability, as he's nearly 20 years older than his opponent. Moreover, Harris's campaign has now raised $540 million since it launched. Many are calling it a record for any campaign in history. Opinion polls also show that Kamala Harris has an edge over Donald Trump by a 7-point margin. So even though the Democratic Party has momentum, the race for the White House remains close, as we all know how quickly a candidate's fortunes can change. And even as polling day draws closer, both Trump and Harris will take nothing for granted. So now for more on this, we are joined by our White House correspondent Rohit Sharma from Washington, D.C. So Rohit, my first question to you would be, do you think Kamala Harris is actually running on a sugar high, as the Republicans like to say? And do you think that her popularity right now is because of the extensive media coverage that's being given to her campaign?
So I think yes, there's definitely that. The other fact has been that, when you look at things when they were compared with Biden, um, she has done well in polling. I mean, that was one of the reasons why Biden decided to give up the candidacy this time, is because uh, Kamala was polling well. So I think there's that as well, combined with the fact that, she got this domination locked in right before the DNC, and you obviously see a poll bump right after any convention. So I think these are the factors. Now, as far as if this is different than any other candidate, I think people generally are excited about her candidacy, and when I say people, I mean the Democrats. That is, but to say it's only because of if this is only because of media, I think. The media hasn't given it the scrutiny, and I think we will see that. We actually have started seeing that. I mean, there was a New York Times opinion yesterday which said joy is not a strategy, and taking an aim at the Democrats were saying Kamala Harris brings joy. So we'll probably see a lot of stories that will deep dive into her policies and her accomplishments and her past, and what a future Harris administration would look like. So yeah, I think things will change from here now on.
Right. That's interesting. And if I may also ask, if you look at history, even Hillary Clinton maintained a lead in the polls after her nomination at the Democratic National Convention in 2016. but things did not turn out in her favor. Do you think Kamala Harris will share a similar fate? Or does she have some sort of X factor, some learning from the 2016 campaign that you think can help her?
Yeah, I mean, the comparisons with Hillary, they will not stop. And I think that's one of the things that we even observed at the convention, where some of the speakers, including Hillary Clinton herself, said that there are cracks in the ceiling, but you still need to break it. Look, polls capture one aspect, and we've seen this with polls in other democracies too. A lot of people were surprised in results in some other nations that went to poll this year with what the exit polls had predicted, and what the end results were. So I think there is that hesitation. If we compare this to Hillary Clinton, I think Hillary Clinton had more momentum. She was leading by much, much, much better margins against Trump, and Trump still won. So I think that's what's making Democrats a little nervous. And look, 47, 46, 45, 48 are dead heat essentially. These are within the 3% margin of error. So I think it will be tough to say, how this will pan out. But the fact of the matter is, if you speak to people in the Democratic camp, and they're nervous. I don't think there's something, I don't think they're delusional, especially with what happened in 2016. Now, does Kamala have an X factor? She definitely is an African American / Indian candidate. So she's, bringing out voters from minorities, much like what Obama did in 2008. So there's that. There's also the fact that Democrats know that they need to plan better, learning from their experiences 8 years ago against Donald Trump. So, there is some strategy in that as well. But there's no saying as to if she's got the X factor. A lot of people thought Hillary had it in her bag. They already started writing, big policy proposals that she was going on campaign trail talking at this point in time 8 years ago, because she thought she was going to win it. People around her thought they were going to win it. People were already talking about cabinet positions and whatnot. I don't think Kamala is there yet. I think Kamala and her campaign are strictly focused on making sure the campaign goes through successfully in the swing states. And I think they're not looking far ahead. They're just taking one piece at a time right now.
Right, I see. And finally, I have to ask, how do you think the Gaza ceasefire and what's happening between Israel and Hamas will figure into Harris's lead in the opinion polls, since it's a very sensitive topic, and we already know the Democrats have not been very good at handling this issue?
It's a pending issue. It's something that's that's pretty evident. We saw how big of a role it played at the convention. We saw things that played out both inside the convention and outside the convention in Chicago, with people bringing pins and badges and Arafat scarves and uncommitted delegates. It was something that Democrats wanted to avoid. I mean, that's why they sent out Secretary Blinken to the Middle East to somehow get a deal done. It is an important, very important issue. The other thing that fears Democrats, and then again speaking with some of the protesters myself, is that some are, even if we get to a ceasefire now, people are not wanting to forgive the Democrats, or I should say, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, because they think they're responsible for aiding Israel and in committing what they say are human rights violations in the city of Gaza. So I think there is that resentment among some of the key voters, voting blocks in some of these swing states. So the order is to get a ceasefire done. I think that's the first thing they want to do, and then go and speak and engage with his voters. And I think they've tried that to some extent. It has worked, but if they get to a ceasefire sometime soon, and they could re-engage with his voters, and they will have to, I should say, to sort of win their votes back. And if they lose these votes, it's a very, very tough path for Kamala Harris to win the elections.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us, Rohit. Moving on, the presidential candidates are in a relentless competition for votes. Both Harris and Trump are throwing out new policies and ideas, but the one that's gained some traction in recent days is the child tax credit. Now, this isn't a subject that would ordinarily have received much attention in the middle of a presidential campaign. But we need to understand what the child tax credit is and why candidates are suddenly banking on this policy. So, in American elections and in American politics, each party tries to one up the other on its approach to family friendliness and reaching out to middle income households. The child tax benefit is one of the policies that comes up when we talk about these issues. It was established in 1997 to provide relief to parents while their children were young. Under this benefit, families receive grants of up to $2,000 per child. Now, both Harris and Trump are promising to expand the credit if they are elected to power. For instance, Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance has expressed intentions of lifting the value of the child tax credit to $5,000. But if this happens, it could raise the cost of the program by trillions of dollars over the next decade. On the other hand, Kamala Harris wants to enhance the child tax credit to $3,600 per child, as well as to create a $6,000 credit for newborns. Politicians see the child tax credit as a weapon against inequality. In 2021, there was a temporary expansion of this program that massively cut child poverty for a year. And from relatively small beginnings, the child tax credit has grown significantly more generous over time. Over the years, the benefit has become accessible to many middle-income families. But now, bids to transform this program into a much larger entitlement are conceived as unworkable by observers and analysts. The cost of expanding the credit has been a contentious point among lawmakers at a time when America's national debt continues to climb. For example, Harris's proposal could add $1.2 trillion to federal deficits over the next decade. Vance's idea could cost between $2 to $3 trillion over the same period. All in all, analysts believe that candidates calling for the expansion of the child tax credits are really indulging in a farce. They want to make it to the White House without really thinking about the repercussions of the policies that they're proposing. Now it's time for some quick updates on the political landscape in America that you might have missed. 16 Republican-led states are suing the Biden administration to block a controversial program that gives protection from deportation to illegal migrants who are married to US citizens. The states, led by Texas, are suing the Parole in Place rule, announced in June by the Department of Homeland Security. The rule allows for humanitarian parole and a path to permanent residency for certain illegal immigrant spouses of US citizens, without them having to leave the country. The states argue that the rule violates federal law, which prohibits illegal migrants from obtaining immigration benefits. The new process applies to non-citizen spouses who have lived in the US for 10 years as of June 2024 and are judged not to pose a threat to public safety. Moving on, Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance has revealed that if Donald Trump is voted to power, he will veto any federal abortion ban passed by Congress. Vance's comments come after Democrats spent night after night of their national convention assailing Trump for his role in overturning the Roe v. Wade case, ending the constitutional right to abortion. Trump, who has often struggled to articulate his stance on abortion, recently pushed back against claims that he would impose further restrictions if re-elected to office. Finally, days after Microsoft and Google flagged concerns about Iran-backed hackers targeting US presidential elections, Meta has also issued a similar warning. Meta has actually revealed that an Iranian hacking group attempted to compromise the WhatsApp accounts of staff members from both Joe Biden and Donald Trump's campaigns. The group is suspected to be the same one that recently targeted the Republican presidential campaign. So that's all we have for you today on Race to the White House. I'm Shashank Matto. Thank you so much for watching Identity Global, and we'll see you again tomorrow.